In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on March 5th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Florida Panthers versus Detroit Red Wings. Detroit skates into this matchup looking like the group that still believes there is something real to chase, not a team just coasting on reputation. The home crowd, the familiar boards, and that little extra jump you get when you wake up in your own bed all stack up for them in a subtle way that does not show up on a box score, but you feel it as soon as the puck drops. Florida comes in on the opposite kind of schedule, finishing a game in Columbus the night before, hopping on a plane, and then being asked to handle a fresh home team in a loud building. That kind of back-to-back is not just about tired legs. It is about decision-making, gaps in the neutral zone, and how quickly a tired stick gets lazy when the puck is cycled deep for the third or fourth time in the period. Detroit's style at home leans into that perfectly. They can play patient, keep things simple for long stretches, then flip the script and turn the pace up for a few minutes, looking comfortable in those wild little pockets of chaos where one bounce can swing a game. It is not that they dominate every shift, it is that when the game tilts their way, they actually know what to do with it. Florida's recent stretch has looked a lot more fragile, with games where they fall behind early, spend most of the night chasing, and let the game stretch out in ways that do not suit them. Losses like that 4-2 result in Columbus pile up on the mental side as much as the standing side, and you start to see a group that presses when they are behind instead of calmly working their way back. String together a run of those nights, and suddenly a negative goal differential is not an accident, it is a pattern. Detroit, on the other hand, has hovered around even in goals for and against while still stacking enough wins to keep themselves in the mix, especially in their own building. Even that 4-3 overtime heartbreaker against Vegas felt less like a step back and more like proof that their game can hang against high-quality opposition. When you blend that steadier 5-on-5 profile with the rest advantage, the home edge, and a visiting team that has been bleeding confidence, it points pretty clearly toward the hosts being the side you trust to handle their business in regulation or beyond. As our first pick for this matchup, the Detroit Red Wings money line is our full game side pick. The total number sitting on this matchup is basically the book saying, quietly, that they do not expect a quiet, sleepy chess match. They expect swings, chances, and a bit of drama on the scoreboard. Both benches are built for that kind of rhythm right now. Detroit sits close to level in goals scored and allowed over the season, so their games tend to land in that 3 goals for, 3 goals against neighborhood where one more bounce either way suddenly turns a tight contest into a track meet. Florida shows the other side of that coin, with their overall scoring pattern pushed upward by a defense that has not exactly slammed the door lately. You see it in the recent results. They take a 5-1 punch from New Jersey, get into a 5-4 kind of roller coaster with the Islanders, then drop that 4-2 decision in Columbus. And none of those feel like random one-offs. They are patching things up the middle, missing their usual two-way heartbeat at center for the season with a knee issue, and that forces role players into spots where they are asked to do a little more than they are comfortable with defensively. Detroit brings its own ingredient to the recipe with the goaltending situation. Their number 1 goalie left Monday's game with an upper body injury and is officially listed as out until at least March 6th, which means either you get a starter rushing back at less than 100% or you lean heavier on the backups, and both of those paths tend to nudge games toward more scoring rather than less. That is not a knock on the backups, it is just how rhythm and confidence work in that position, especially when a team knows the safety net is not quite as tight behind them. Florida playing on the second leg of a road back-to-back adds even more fuel. Tired legs take more penalties, tired minds blow more coverages, and tired defenders lose net front battles in the last 10 minutes when both teams are just trying to survive the shift. Those are exactly the situations where you see a power play marker, a scramble goal, or the classic late empty net sequence that pushes a game from maybe staying tame to suddenly wide open on the scoreboard. Both teams also lean into special teams and late-game desperation when they are chasing points in the standings, which often turns the final few minutes into a kind of controlled chaos with extra attackers, long shifts, and rushes going both ways. When you stack the season-long scoring profiles, the recent high-scoring box scores, the goaltending uncertainty, and the fatigue angle on the visiting side, the script where this matchup quietly stalls at a low total feels like the exception rather than the norm. More often than not, it shapes up as the kind of game that reaches or clears the number that has been posted on the board. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Colorado Avalanche versus Dallas Stars. You get a true heavyweight matchup here, atop of the central clash that actually feels like it deserves the hype. Colorado shows up with a record of 41-10-9, sitting at the top of the division with 91 points, and they look every bit like the team on everyone's short list. Dallas is not far behind at 38-14-9 with 85 points, and there is a very real sense of two neighbors arguing over who owns the street rather than big brother and little brother. Colorado's profile is almost cartoonish. They sit at the top of the league in goals per game around that 3.8 mark, and they also live near the top in goals against, which is a ridiculous combination for anyone trying to slow them down. They pump out over 34 shots a night. They give up only the mid-20s the other way, and it often feels like they just move into your defensive zone and start charging rent. Even when they go on the road, they keep the same personality, structured, fast, and comfortable dictating pace. Dallas, though, is not built like a team that is happy to be the co-star. They score north of 3 goals a game themselves, and they have been especially trustworthy at home, where the building gets loud in that very specific Texas way, and they tend to feed off it. The home record speaks to a group that understands its rink, its boards, its bounces, and that little emotional lift you get when the crowd roars at a good backcheck just as much as at a goal. The Stars also get a subtle but important tool that never shows up on the highlight reel. They control the last change. That means in their own building they can hunt the matchups they want against Colorado's top line, sneaking their preferred defensive pair over the boards when the Avs' big guns hop on. It is the sort of thing you barely notice on TV, but it can turn rush chances into perimeter shots and forced dump-ins, which is exactly what you want against a team that thrives on speed through the middle. Special teams tilt the chessboard a bit as well. Dallas owns a power play humming around 30%, firmly near the top of the league, and it punishes lazy sticks and tired legs very quickly. Colorado, on the other hand, has this weird split personality where the overall machine is elite, but the power play has been stuck in the mud at roughly the mid-teens, towards the lower end of the league. That does not erase how dangerous their talent is, but it does blunt some of the usual road killer feel that a top unit gives you in a whistle-heavy game. Then there is the big storyline on the Dallas side. Mikko Rantanen, who has been a central engine for their offense, is out with that lower body injury from the Olympics, and the team has already talked about him being out for more than just a game or two. Without him, the Stars tend to simplify, leaning more on structure, shorter shifts, and a style that values clean exits and smart entries over trading rushes with a juggernaut. Honestly, that can sometimes help clarify a team's identity, especially in a matchup like this where gambling on every play is probably the worst idea on the board. Both clubs come in hot, Colorado with that steady run of wins on their recent swing through places like Los Angeles and Anaheim, Dallas riding a heater that has included big multi-goal victories in Vancouver and Calgary. They each just survived tough travel and back-to-back spots earlier in the week, then got a bit of breathing room before this one, so this shapes up less like a tired slog and more like two teams choosing how to spend a full tank. On one side, you have the statistical monster that attracts public attention. On the other, you have a home team with matchup control, an edge in power play punch, comfort in tight games in this building, and a sharpened identity with one of their main creators temporarily sidelined. All of that sets the stage for a very real argument that the home side is better positioned to stand up to the league's big bully than the raw numbers on the standings page might make it seem. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dallas Stars money line is our full game side pick. On paper, you see two of the highest scoring attacks in the league, and the first instinct is to expect a track meet with goals flying in from everywhere. Colorado leads the league in goals per game. They have that four-line rhythm where pressure just keeps rolling, and their highlight packages look like video game clips. Dallas is not far behind in raw scoring, and when you glance at their season log, you see plenty of nights where they hang big crooked numbers on the board. Here is the thing, the underlying environment does not scream chaos, it leans toward control. Colorado is not just about offense, they also sit right near the top in goals against per game, and they get there by strangling shot quality and volume, holding opponents to something in the mid-20s in shots on goal most nights. That kind of structure slows things down almost by accident. It is hard to trade chances when one side barely lets you have the puck in the dangerous areas. Dallas plays a different kind of offensive game. They do not fire pucks from everywhere, they live on efficiency. They average only about the mid-20s in shots on goal, which is surprisingly low for a team that scores this much, and it tells you they pick their spots and lean on their skill more than on sheer volume. Remove Rantanen from that equation for a couple of weeks, and a lot of those controlled zone entries and cross-ice passes that create high-danger looks need to be manufactured by committee instead of by a single elite playmaker. That usually nudges a team toward a more conservative rhythm, especially against an opponent that punishes mistakes. Special teams pull in two different directions for the total. Dallas has that power play near 30%, which can turn a sleepy game into a wild one if the whistles pile up. Colorado counters with one of the better penalty kills in the league and a power play that, strangely enough, has lagged in that mid-teens range. So you have one side that can blow open a game with a couple of clean looks, and the other that is very comfortable snuffing out those opportunities and living with lower scoring special teams segments. The recent schedule also points to a more controlled tempo. Both teams have just come off demanding road swings with back-to-backs, and when coaches look at a matchup like this on the calendar, they tend to lean into structure, shorter benches, and an emphasis on staying out of penalty trouble. You can almost picture both benches talking about line discipline, smart changes, and layers through the neutral zone rather than stretching for odd man rushes. The energy in the building will be high, but playoff-style nerves often pull the pace inward rather than outward. It is still completely possible that an early weird bounce or a quick power play goal cracks the game open and everything turns loose, because hockey can be a bit chaotic. However, when you stack up Colorado's defensive suppression, Dallas's lower shot volume without a key creator, strong penalty killing on one side, and coaching tendencies in a game that feels like a measuring stick for both rooms, the more likely picture looks like something closer to a slow simmer on the scoreboard than a festival. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Carolina Hurricanes versus Edmonton Oilers. Carolina walks into Edmonton feeling less like a fun road stop and more like a quiet inspection of how serious the home team really is. This group has spent the season playing that very specific brand of disciplined hockey, where structure matters more than noise, and where good habits show up every single night, not just when the cameras are bright. They are comfortable in tight spaces, patient in the neutral zone, and perfectly happy to turn a simple chip and chase into a long offensive shift that slowly wears down whoever is stuck out there against them. Across the ice, Edmonton leans into almost the complete opposite personality, a club that lives on talent, speed, and a little bit of chaos, trusting that pure ability will fix whatever mess gets made earlier in the shift. The attacks come in waves, the stars touch the puck a lot, and the crowd feeds off those rushes, but that same high-wire style can leave some rough edges in their own end when things break the wrong way. Honestly, that contrast is what makes this matchup so fun, because one side is trying to play chess while the other side is playing something that looks a lot closer to pinball. Carolina, for its part, has doubled down on its identity. They have invested in a blue line that stacks layers in front of the net. They rely on smart stick work from players like Jacob Slavin, and they have added size and mobility with pieces such as K'Andre Miller, which makes breaking them down shift after shift feel like a real chore. Up front, the top of the lineup has evolved from hard-working skill into something closer to a full-on problem, with Seth Jarvis growing into a genuine difference maker and Nikolai Ehlers adding even more speed and playmaking to an already sharp forward group. Even with bumps in goal earlier in the year, they have settled into a steady pairing in the crease, and they have handled injuries with the kind of calm that comes from knowing the system will protect whoever is wearing the mask that night. Edmonton, meanwhile, has been busy reshaping the supporting cast around its stars. Recent moves for players like Connor Murphy, Jason Dickinson, and Colton Dach show a front office that knows it needs more reliability behind the big names, more responsible minutes, more little details that do not always show up on a highlight reel. The downside is that those changes create fresh pairings, new lines, and a lot of subtle reads that can be off by just a half step in the early going. Add in injuries to depth pieces such as Curtis Lazar and Matthias Janmark, and suddenly there are new responsibilities for everyone, new matchups, and different roles that still need to settle. Here is the thing, when one bench is busy learning who likes the puck on their forehand and who prefers it on their backhand, the other bench is rolling familiar combinations that have seen this script over and over again. Carolina tends to thrive in exactly those spots where trust and structure collides with a team that is still figuring out how all the new pieces fit. In a building that naturally leans toward emotion, rush chances, and star power, the quieter strengths matter a lot, like defensive chemistry, predictable reads, and the ability to stay patient when the game wants to get wild. That subtle edge and stability, along with a style that travels well and does not rely on last change or friendly whistles, tilts the long game toward the visitors covering their side more often than not. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. Both offenses are built to score in bunches, with Edmonton especially leaning into that we will just score one more than you energy that delights fans and ages coaches. They create chances off the rush, off broken plays, off pure skill, and sometimes off nothing more than a superstar deciding it is time to go. The flip side is that this style often leaves some loose threads in their own zone. Coverage can get scrambled when defensemen jump, gaps open when forwards fly the zone a hair early, and all of that adds up to extra looks for the other side. At home, with the crowd pushing them to skate, that tendency usually does not shrink, it grows. You can almost feel the building encourage risk, and risk has a habit of feeding the scoreboard. Carolina is not a passive guest in that setting. They may be more structured, but they also generate a ton of volume, throwing pucks from the points, attacking off the cycle, and using skilled forwards like Ehlers, Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, and Jarvis to turn second and third chances into real threats. They are comfortable living in the offensive zone, stacking shifts, and forcing tired defenders to make one extra read, which is exactly where mistakes sneak in. Edmonton has tried to steady the defensive side with those recent additions, asking Murphy and Dickinson to soak up tough minutes and to help fix some of the problems on the penalty kill. That kind of shift in identity, from high-flying to slightly more responsible, usually takes time. Early on, players are thinking more, reacting a little less, and in hockey, that tiny delay can open passing lanes and shooting windows that were not there before. So while the long-term plan might be to bring the goals against number down, the short-term reality often looks messy. Here is why that matters for the total. The betting market clearly expects a lively pace, and the matchup itself supports that idea. There is elite talent on both benches, a home team that leans toward track meet hockey, and a road team that can create a pile of chances off pressure and possession. Mix in fresh chemistry experiments on the Oilers' back end, a crowd that loves offense, and two power plays that can punish even small mistakes, and you get far more realistic paths to a high-scoring script than to a quiet slog. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Montreal Canadiens versus Anaheim Ducks. On first look, this matchup feels like one of those coin flip nights where the logos trick you more than the numbers do. Montreal strolls in with that big-name aura and a high-powered offense that has been living near the top of the league scoring charts, while Anaheim is quietly putting together a strong season with a record that looks a lot better than people casually scrolling scores might expect. At home, the Ducks have turned Honda Center into a place that feels very comfortable, with that 21-9-1 kind of home split that tells you they rarely roll over in their own building. Books tend to frame this type of game as basically even, nudging the bigger market side ever so slightly, and it makes sense because Montreal's reputation does a lot of the talking before the puck even drops. The interesting part comes when you stop thinking about brand names and start thinking about bodies, travel, and rhythm. Montreal is in the middle chunk of a West Coast swing, coming off that wild 7-5 track meet in San Jose with a date against the Kings lined up right after this one, and that is exactly the kind of stretch that wears on legs and focus, even for a high-octane group. Anyone who has stayed up late watching these road trips knows the pattern. One game turns into a track meet. The next night you still want 2 points, but you quietly hope you do not have to empty the tank again. Montreal's identity is pretty clear by now. They throw a lot of offense at you, lean on a very strong power play, and then live with the fact that they give up plenty the other way thanks to a softer defensive structure and a penalty kill that leaks more than their coaching staff would like. They are built to thrive in chaos, which is fun to watch, but it can be a headache when you are the team trying to nurse a road lead in a loud building. Anaheim is not a defensive shrine by any stretch, but at home they look a lot more settled. They seem more comfortable dictating pace, and having last change lets their coach chase matchups like a chess player who finally gets to move first instead of reacting. On this homestand, they have been camped out in their own building, picking up 4 wins in 5 games, and in 4 of those they have hit at least 3 goals, which tells you they have been able to handle both tight finishes and the more open style Montreal likes to create. In net, Anaheim enjoys a small but meaningful edge, with Lucas Dostal posting numbers that sit a touch better than the combination Montreal has been rolling out, both in terms of goals against and save percentage, which matters a lot when the game script tilts toward trading chances. That edge might not sound dramatic on paper, but in a game that feels very even on the surface, even a small difference in the crease can swing how comfortable you feel backing one bench over the other. There is also the familiar betting pattern where public money leans toward the classic jersey, and Montreal fits that role perfectly, so the quieter home side can sometimes be a little undervalued simply because they do not have the same spotlight. Put it all together, the homestand groove, the road wear on Montreal, the style clash and the goaltending nudge, and the matchup tilts toward the team that is sleeping in its own beds and steering the changes on home ice. As our first pick for this matchup, the Anaheim Ducks money line is our full game side pick. The projection for goals is already set with some respect for offense, and it makes sense when you remember how both of these teams like to play. Montreal comes in averaging around 3.5 goals for and a little over 3 against, and Anaheim sits in that low 3 range on both sides of the ledger as well, so their usual nights, when you mash them together, point toward plenty of action. Both teams generate enough volume to make that more than a theory. Anaheim usually throws just over 30 shots at the net, while Montreal hovers in the mid-20s, and neither of these groups is known for strangling games down to low shot totals. When you put that kind of chance creation on both benches, you are basically inviting puck movement, rebounds, and those scrambles in front that goalies secretly hate and fans secretly love. Special teams keep pushing the same direction. Montreal's power play sits in that top-tier neighborhood around 25%, which means that every whistle that sends them to the man advantage feels like a mini crisis for the opponent. The flip side is their penalty kill, which lingers in the mid-70s, and that soft spot opens the door for Anaheim's first unit, which has been performing above league average and benefits from that same offensive mindset that shows up at 5-on-5. Anaheim's penalty kill also floats in the high 70s, so you get this funny setup where both teams can hurt you when they have the extra skater, and neither side is particularly great at shutting those chances down. Recent form lights this up even more. In Montreal's last 5 games, every single one has finished with at least 6 total goals, which tells you their style is not just theory but reality right now. Anaheim's last 5 have a similar flavor, with 4 of those hitting 6 or more and a couple of them turning into full-blown track meets with scores in that 6-5 or 5-4 type range. If you look at their combined last 10 games, only one has stayed below that 6-goal mark, which is a pretty loud pattern for such a short stretch. Goaltending numbers support the idea that the floodgates are always at risk of cracking. Anaheim's regulars are sitting around a 3.0 goals against with save percentages in the high .88 range, while Montreal's tandem is a little looser, with goals against above 3 and save percentages in the low .88 range. Those are not disaster numbers, but they are not exactly built to suffocate a game, especially when both offenses are pushing the pace and creating traffic at the crease. Both benches tend to take their fair share of penalties, roughly 4 a night, which means we can reasonably expect several stretches with one team set up on the power play. That is exactly where Montreal's dangerous top unit and Anaheim's upgraded group do their best work, snapping the puck around, stretching penalty killers, and turning small mistakes into red lights. There is always a world where a goalie stands on his head, posts get in the way, or whistles go quiet, but with 2 aggressive attacks, soft spots on the penalty kills, and a recent stretch filled with high-scoring finals, this feels like a spot where you would rather be rooting for goals than hoping everything suddenly tightens up. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Minnesota Wild versus Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas heads back home after that long, tiring stretch away from the Strip, and you can almost hear the first big cheer before the puck even drops. Those trips wear you down a little, sure, but they also tend to sand off the rough edges, especially for a team that likes to stay calm, play within its structure, and let the game come to them. Minnesota strolls in with a record that looks pretty good when you glance at the standings page, but the rhythm of their games often feels different. More swings, more emotional whiplash, the kind of flow that can make you feel like a genius one night and completely lost the next. They lean into that chaos a bit, and sometimes that works, but when you are walking into a building where the home side knows every bounce, every board, every quirk of the ice, that loose feel can turn from a weapon into a problem. Vegas, by contrast, plays the kind of hockey that makes coaches happy and bettors quietly breathe easier. They are comfortable without the puck, they close gaps, they keep attacks to the outside, and they are usually the ones deciding which kind of chances get traded rather than simply accepting whatever tempo the opponent wants. Honestly, if you have ever sat through a third period with money on a team, that ability to slow things down and make the game feel smaller is pure comfort food. Here is the thing that matters most for the side. With last change, the home bench can pick the matchups, roll the pairs they want against Minnesota's biggest threats, and lean on that nothing-too-fancy identity that has carried them through plenty of big nights. The Wild can absolutely punch back, and there will be stretches where they look like they might tilt the ice for a few shifts at a time, but over 60 minutes the team that is better at choosing its battles usually has the better chance to cover for its backers. As our first pick for this matchup, the Vegas Golden Knights money line is our full game side pick. On paper, both of these clubs have the tools to light things up, dangerous shooters, creative entries, and enough skill to turn a broken play into a clip you see again on social media that night. That kind of talent tempts people toward expecting fireworks every single time, which is understandable, but not every game between two talented teams turns into a track meet. Minnesota has been in a lot of wild scorelines lately, and that sticks in your head because high-scoring games are simply more memorable. You remember the nights where goals kept coming and you forget the grindy ones where everything got swallowed up in the neutral zone. Some of that recent scoring noise comes from hot finishing, a bounce here, a screen there, a goalie picking up a puck a split second late. Those stretches feel like the new normal while they are happening, but they very rarely stay that way for long. Vegas leans toward a more measured style, and that spills over into how many chances both teams actually get. They limit clean looks, they break up passes that would normally turn into tap-ins, and they are not shy about making simple plays that might look boring but quietly erase scoring opportunities. If you think about totals as a tug of war between chaos and control, the Wild tend to pull toward chaos while the Golden Knights dig in on the control side of the rope. Let me explain why that mix matters. When a free-flowing team with recent high-scoring games runs into a structured group that prefers to squeeze the game, you often get something that sits closer to the careful side of the spectrum. The visiting team has to work harder for every clean shot, frustration creeps in, and instead of trading rushes all night, the game can get bogged down in heavy shifts along the wall and smart clears off the glass. It is not that the skill disappears, it just does not always show up as a pile of goals on the scoreboard. Honestly, plenty of people love rooting for bigger totals because it is more fun to cheer for goals than for quiet defensive sticks in the lane. But spots like this, with one team coming off a burst of high scoring and the other happy to play the grown-up in the room, often tilt toward a more restrained script. The story still has drama, just not necessarily an endless stream of red lights behind the net. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.